So if you saw my video last week about tides don't really come in or out, it's rather just two bulges being pulled by the sun and the moon, and the earth actually rotates in and out of that. That's what causes high tide, low tide. You may be astonished to know that some places have one high tide and low tide per day, while other places have two high tides and two low tides within a 24-hour period of time. So predicting tides, high tide, low tide, it's kind of as challenging as predicting the weather. There's a lot of factors that go into it. It can take up to 18 years of studying one location on Earth to see a full lunar cycle repeat itself to predict tides accurately. So if the Earth didn't have any large continents, everywhere on Earth would experience semi-diurnal tides. That would be two high tides and two low tides per day. But because of the large continents and the geography of peninsulas and different things, that affects how many high tides and the height of those high tides and low tides during a 24-hour cycle. The most common tide that we see along our shorelines is semi-diurnal. And if you live in the east coast of the United States, including Florida, you're going to see a semi-diurnal tide. Two equal high tides and two equal low tides in a 24-hour period, and they switch about every 6.5 hours. The least common type of tide is called diurnal. That is where places only see one high tide and one low tide. Most of the Gulf of Mexico sees this kind of tide. All right, so the second most common tide is mixed semi-diurnal. This is where you have two different high tides. One's higher than the other, and you have two different low tides. One's gonna be lower than the other low tide. Now, when I said most of the Gulf of Mexico sees diurnal tides, from Apalachicola to the Keys, we see on the west coast of Florida mixed semi-diurnal tides. So in Florida, you've got diurnal, mixed semi-diurnal, and semi-diurnal. It's one of only like two places in the world where you're gonna see in a short amount of space all three types of tidal patterns. All right, so because predicting tides are so difficult, we use tidal gauges. And so this is gonna use almost like a sonar that shoots a beam down to the water and reflects it back, and the time it takes gives it its distance. And that's a way for us to then send it to a satellite, and we can connect to the internet and see where our tides are actually at during a given time.